So what we're going to talk about here today is what's new with communication software, primarily around, with that kind of in mind, the communication software. The biggest one I'm going to be talking about, is this primarily based off of, is FactoryTalk Link Gateway. One thing with FactoryTalk Link Gateway, there is a resource and status service monitor, MQTT publishing. The professional version has access to extended tag properties and configured alarm tags. A Link UI connector, which we'll get into that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about some design considerations, especially when it comes to FactoryTalk Link Gateway. You may not be using our upper level software. You may not be using FactoryTalk View SE or Optics. You may be using Ignition. So how do we fit in that Ignition thought process, right? There is a way that we are actually have a better solution for you to be able to get data from Rockwell controllers into your Ignition system. A couple of things on this slide I want to talk about other than the operating systems. The biggest one is an Ethernet in-cabinet LLDP discovery. In other words, being able to discover these data sources is the big thing. Instead of having, for example, with OPC UA, you have to know the node and all that kind of stuff. This is a way that you can discover the FactoryTalk Links Gateway OPC UA connection, so you don't have to know that. You can actually click on it and browse to it and all that good stuff. FactoryTalk Diagnostics Counter, we'll talk about that. And again, this is kind of coming off that first slide. Resource service status and the UA connector and Links Gateway, a major update. And that major update was primarily around the interface. The interface is a lot cleaner. If you haven't used FactoryTalk Links Gateway in the past, this isn't going to mean a whole lot. But if you have, I think you'll find the new interface is a little bit more intuitive, flows a little bit better. You can see one pane and see a lot more of what's going on with it than having to click down through a tree and try to figure out why a service is stopped or something of that nature. When we talk about industrial communication software, talking about the significant changes of 6.5, this is just kind of probably a good way of looking at what I just said in the past with for example, the system diagnostics. That's looking at and being able to historize not only alarms, but the computer alarms themselves, like CPU utilization, network utilization, being able to do ICMP pings out to a device, a robot, to see if it's still alive or not, and being able to alarm on that, right? To be able to get maintenance personnel out to look at it, or IT personnel, or whatever it may be that needs to identify and resolve the issue with that piece of a control equipment. So that feature has been added into it. Of course, we're going to talk about OPC UA data sources, the polymorphic tags, and getting data to IT/cloud, right? So how do we get our data out to the cloud? With using standard protocols instead of forcing you to say, okay, you got to use a Rockwell stack, right? This is about being able to provide that data to systems other than Rockwell. And then we'll talk about HMI inheritance. And again, this resolves around tag structures and extended tag properties and things like that. So let's start with the resource status services. So there's three components to this when we talk about resources and status service. We're talking about, like I said earlier, computer, CPU, memory, network load, software services that are running, CPU. If you ever, some of these applications that you fire them up and run them, everything's running great, and then all of a sudden the service stops for some reason, right? And a lot of times we look for a lot of things before we decide to look and figure out, oh, that service is not running, right? So we spend, several minutes to 30 minutes to an hour, and we've come to realize there was a service stop, right? So how do we figure out, how do we get a way to monitor that and identify that more quickly so you don't have to deal with that? Diagnostics, counter, and monitoring, that's mainly around, that's got to do around the Rockwell components and software, but being able to get counters off that information, and again, the ICMP pinging of the Ethernet network devices so that we can identify things and get to them a lot more quickly to resolve the issues. What you're looking at is screenshots within FactoryTalk Links Gateway. So when you go in and you're going through this configuration process, you are identifying things like setting up resource status services, what you're going to monitor and what you're going to look at. And I know that's kind of an eye chart. So if you look down right there, that is the actual FactoryTalk Links Gateway OPC UA server. So what we're doing here is we're taking that server and we're exposing things out to the tag structure so that we can look at like the number of client connection calls. All these data points out here can now be brought in, and you can build alarms off of it. You can bring it to your HMI screen. You can surface that data up to something else. Before, the only way you could do that is you'd go in and you'd have to look at it through a FactoryTalk Diagnostics counter module. But that's the only way you'd see it, right? You couldn't get to it no other way. So that really wasn't very helpful. This allows you to send that data up, maybe possibility of sending out email alerts and things like that. This really you can alarm on things like that. This one, again, is the service, resource and status service, but this is actually adding different applications other than just any services that are on a computer. You can click and you can add them in, and then you will get access to those services like how much CPU usage is that thing using? How much, what's the CPU speed of the computer and all this kind of stuff. So again, before you'd get to it is through like the task monitor off Windows, but you really couldn't do anything with that, right? Now you can take this information, expose it to your SCADA system, your HMI systems, and not to mention, remember this is FactoryTalk Links Gateway, so it's not just SE it can be exposed to. We can expose it to ignition products and things like that for particular services that's running on that computer. So again, the whole purpose of this is to improve the OEE by detecting issues before they happen or get to them more quickly. Before we have a major failure of a piece of equipment, line going down, we can identify things more quickly and address them in a more efficient manner. The other one piece of this is you can go in the pinging capability. So you can set it up so that it pings an IP address. You can set up how often it pings that IP address, the frequency, and then generate alarms off that if something's amiss. And again, all this tag structure, right, the address, the last time ping, you'll be able to get all that, bring it back to a SCADA screen or something of that nature so that you can make it available to those people that need to see it. So all this is around troubleshooting and being able to keep equipment running in your plant. This is a big chart of what FactoryTalk Links Gateway does in a nutshell. One of the things it does is this OPC UA connector. What that means is we can take third-party products like Kepware or whoever they may be, and we can bring them into the FactoryTalk Link system, and I'll get into a little bit later on why that's important. One of the reasons, I guess, I'll go ahead and say right now, is you'll be using one system to surface all this data up no matter what output you're trying to get to. The live data is the FactoryTalk Links servers that you can define, that you can configure within a FactoryTalk application. And that's important because that FactoryTalk Links data is not an OPC UA server. It is a proprietary connection to our Rockwell controllers. It is 10s, 20 times faster than any OPC UA server you're going to get talk to a Rockwell controller. We will run circles around Kepware trying to talk to our controllers. That's all well and good, but if you bring that up, it's in-house, not OPC UA, nothing else can use it other than Rockwell, right? So that's kind of like, okay, well, great. That's not really helping me to a large degree. That's where this gateway product comes in. We still get the good communications weight through the gateway product, but we can actually surface the data out as an OPC UA connection. So we're getting the benefit of the throughput, the communications out of this product, out of the gateway product down to the controller, but then we got all these ways of providing the data outside of that. Again, we talked about the resource status monitor. That's another way we can bring data into Gateway. So again, bringing data in through our proprietary or through a third party and being able to do some things with it within the Gateway product. So how can we, what does the data look like? We can pull it in, whether it's in folders or whether it's just raw data values. If it happens to be broken off into tag groups like UDTs and things like that, we'll obviously be able to see that. And then, how many people are familiar with OPC UA companion specifications? OPC UA, if you dig into it, right, the manual, the spec manual, that thing's thousands of pages long. The truth of the matter is, very little of it is actually implemented in the wild. Okay, the specification's there, but not everybody implements everything that's there. A companion specification is what the OPC UA Foundation thought, you know, What we ought to do is we ought to build these models of the way a particular piece of equipment ought to look like, right? Like a filler machine in a pharmaceutical, right? There's certain data values that are the same. I don't care whose filler piece of equipment you buy, those are the data values that's associated with it. Well, what a companion specification is meant to do is work with the machine vendors to define what these specs are and define the data points that are associated with like a filler or like a capping machine or a bottling machine or whatever it may be. And if they adhere to that companion spec, then it becomes much easier to integrate your line no matter who your vendor is, because if they follow that, those are the data points that the OPC UA servers are expecting to get in and provide out. Okay, so that's what companion specifications are really meant to do. What we're seeing here is that we work with those companion specifications if your machine builder does. Does that make sense? So we will bring data in according to that spec. That's what we're getting at. Once we get the data in, either in these data forms, right, the purpose of it is not to stop there, but to get it out. What Gateway does is it provides the ability to provide MQTT publishing, which is an IoT protocol to send data to an MQTT broker, and it's a publisher-subscriber model. So this has been around for a long time. It's just now that Rockwell has decided to adopt it. There's other companies that have adopted it too, but it's now part of what we can do to provide data out to your systems. Of course, OPC UA, that's been around a long time too, but Rockwell, probably in the last, I don't know, 4 to 5 years, has really made an effort to start trying to provide ways to use our middleware software, if you will, and then being able to get that data out to other systems. Of course, OPC DA, Microsoft Dynamic Data Exchange, DDE, we all know that. We all know it, love it, hate it, right? Excel, real-time data. So all of those ways are ways we can get data out of FactoryTalk Link's Gateway and into other systems. And this is an example of some of those other systems we can talk to. Plex, which is Rockwell's MES solution, and MQTT Broker, which is an open standard, right? So no matter who you may be using in that case. FactoryTalk Optics is a product made by Rockwell. It's going to be a huge piece of Rockwell's portfolio. So if you have not been exposed to optics and you are a Rockwell user, I'd encourage you to do some research on FactoryTalk Optics, because it's going to be, you're going to see it more and more as time goes forward. We're going to use it for a lot more than just HMI. It's going to be our data way of getting data out of our controllers and sending data up to things like data mosaics and some other products that we have. Matter of fact, you could actually say that FactoryTalk Link's Gateway and optics can fit the same footprint. They can do a lot of the same things. When you choose one over another one, it just depends on what you're doing and what you currently have in your plant. One of them's geared towards, I'd say FactoryTalk Link's Gateway is geared towards a site that already has a lot of the FactoryTalk Link's data servers in it, because it's really meant to get that data and send it out beyond where it is. And if you don't have that, then optics is a good fit, because optics would connect to, it already has native drivers into other PLCs other than Rockwell. And again, once it gets it inside optics, it can surface it out with a lot of these protocols the same way the Link's Gateway can. So do products that do a lot of the same thing, but it depends on where the data is coming from as the one you probably want to use. And if there's a question about where you are on that, we'll be glad to come out and talk to you and make some suggestions on how you proceed forward with that. In a high-level overview, that's what Link's Gateway does. We talked about the MQTT publishing. We're going to talk about a little bit more about the extended properties here in a second. The other thing I said they did was they improved the user interface. This is an OPC UA server. We can easily tell that the OPC UA server is running. And when I click on it, I can pretty much see the entire configuration of that server and everything that's going on with it. The old way that this worked was you'd have to click in through these trees to find out all this information. So we changed the flow of it. That was one of the biggest things we did. And the other thing is you can see very quickly that we got an OPC UA server, MQTT capabilities, and you can see which ones are turned on and turned off, all from the same pane. So it just makes it easier to work with and deal with it than the old structure that we had in the past. So from FactoryTalk Link Gateway, that was one of the biggest things they did from an interface perspective, is just to make it easier for you to be able to administer the system. From an MQTT perspective, again, you're getting a lot of the same look, right? You got the flow, you click on the MQT, it drills right down into here, and then you click on that, and then we start seeing how do we set MQTT up? What's the formats? What's the broker's name? What's the security? Again, just all right there where you can see it very easily. If you're not familiar with MQTT, the couple things, or the biggest things it provides in its data packet, is a value, a quality, and a timestamp in a JSON text format. To break down a FactoryTalk links, right, if you get the basic, you can do 1,000 tags MQTT. If you go to professional, you can do 40,000 tags of MQTT going out. Links Gateway Professional. In other words, you have to be the professional version of Links Gateway to do this. One of the things, if you ever opened up your ControlLogix program and you looked at a tag, and then over on the right-hand side of that tag tree, you see a bunch of properties, right? Some of those properties are things like the name, the description, the scope, the quality, the timestamp, right? But you got engineered units, min, max, and all this kind of stuff that's associated with it. If you're using FactoryTalk View SE, you can see all that data. You can use all that data. If you're not using SE, you can't see any of that. Right? Well, that kind of stinks, right? Because what this allows you to do is allows you to define all that information at the controller. Well, I'm using Ignition. I would love to be able to get access to that data, right? How do I do that? FactoryTalk Links Gateway Professional now provides the ability for you to see Logix extended tags and properties via OPC UA, DA, or MQTT. You just have to be using the professional version. And in the past, again, it was previously these extended tags were limited to only Rockwell software, period. So Gateway sitting on top of your systems, FactoryTalk Links Gateway Professional, will expose that tag structure, the extended tag properties. And a lot of that has to do with your FactoryTalk alarm and events that you define inside your controllers. This one is from the OPC UA Foundation. And the reason I included this is because this whole thing was what's a polymorphic data, right? You won't find that new I never didn't find it in OPC UA specification, right? I think that's a Rockwell marketing term, okay? What it really comes down to is this. OPC UA supports data definitions that dynamically change form, right? In other words, they can change form from being just a single value to an array of values. The size and dimensions of the array can change on the fly from your device, right? In the past, what would happen is if that occurred, you'd start generating errors, right? What this allows it to do is adapt to that so you don't get error generation. And this is the values that actually control that inside the spec. I will say that very few people use this value rank of -3. But if you dig into this spec, you'll find out all this information in short. Long and short of it is, we support this. Okay, that's what you got to remember. The thing is, how many devices actually currently would do that? I don't know. It's just the vendor out there who's, that you're connecting to and all that. But I would say that the reason we're doing it is because it's coming, or there's already devices out there that we need to be able to do this with. One of the things with an OPC UA connector is typically it would send data point values or update the data point values whenever two things happen: the value or the quality of the data changed, right? So if you were subscribing to it, oh, I need to get it now because I subscribed to the data point. Well, there's been a new one which you can actually get it on time change. So if there's a time change associated with that from the source, then it gets signaled, hey, you need to pick this up because there's a new update. Why is this important? For historical data collection, right? Because you're driving that off time, not off the value changing. So when you look at size in the system, the total number of tags per application that you can put in an application is 1 million tags, okay? Just gonna throw these numbers out here so you're all aware of them. So total tags on scan per data server instance, and you can have 10 data servers in one application, is 100,000 at 1 second. So if you've got one data server, don't try to push past 100,000 tags. It's not going to be pretty if you do, okay? So that's the other thing. Total number of controllers or shortcuts per data server instance is 40 if you've got 30,000 tags per controller, or 20 if you've got 60,000 tags per controller. If you've ever set up FactoryTalk ME, right? For you, those of you who use Ignition, if you ever set up panel view pluses and things like that, you're going through and you're creating these shortcuts. You're defining data servers. That's what you're doing. Those are data servers, all right? It's just when you get to SE, you can start having more than one data server inside an SE application. Truth of the matter is, an application is not necessarily an SE application. It is a FactoryTalk application, okay? So if I just had FactoryTalk Links Gateway, I went into FactoryTalk Administrative Console, and I'd create an application, and then in that application I start adding data servers. That's what you're doing. You're doing this right here. These, again, are the different versions of FactoryTalk Links Gateway. Remember, if you're going to look at using extended tags, you have to use the professional version. This is the breakdown of the number of UA and DA tag capability that we can do. FactoryTalk Links, remember I told you we didn't charge for it. It's free to download. You can download it all day long. The problem is we don't do UA or DA out of it. It's proprietary Rockwell controllers only. Right, you got to put something else on top of it. That something else you got to put on top of it is the gateway product. So when you put the gateway product in there, if you already have FactoryTalk Links, we're just going to use FactoryTalk Links with gateway. If you don't have FactoryTalk Links and you buy gateway, it comes with it. So either way, you're getting the FactoryTalk Links. So with FactoryTalk Links, you got the embedded one, right? That's actually embedded in the controller, the 5480 hardware, right? You get a DA of 500 tags and a UA of 500 tags, right? But then you start getting into software versions that are like you load on a PC and you can see the tag counts that you're going to be dealing with and how high they go. There is something called Data Bridge. What Data Bridge does, it allows you to take data coming in. You set up a data bridge on information coming in to FactoryTalk Links Gateway, and then you could send that data to another controller. Okay, instead of sending it up, you go controller to controller. That controller does not have to be a Rockwell controller. I can come in a Rockwell controller and I can go out OPC UA to a Siemens. Okay, so I can share information through the Links Gateway if you wanted to do that. If you are looking at third-party products or third-party controllers, that's where our Kepware Enterprise, we would utilize that to be able to get to like Siemens and some other vendors and things like that. One thing a lot of people don't realize here either is that if you got a Rockwell system and you need Kepware, Rockwell sells a version of Kepware that is the manufacturing suite. The only thing that's missing from it is the Rockwell drivers that I'm aware of. This is kind of just rehashing what we said earlier. FactoryTalk Links, OPC, DA, UA, and HMI tags. Now, that is one thing I need to say real quick, is that FactoryTalk Links Gateway allows you to be able to get to HMI tags too, HMI data. So it's just not information coming out of the controller. If you do have FactoryTalk View SE and you've got data tags defined inside of SE, it will surface those data tags out OPC UA also. Local directory structures. This is the one I think that quite honestly is the most interesting to me. Is let's say that you don't have a Rockwell SCADA system, you got an Ignition SCADA system, okay? You're wanting to get data out to some HMI or third-party OPC UA client. So what would that infrastructure look like? What would that network structure look like? What we would do is that down in red is actually the FactoryTalk Links Gateway, right? All this other stuff that you see in here, that's just the FactoryTalk Discovery service that's running. That's the Activation Manager. That's FactoryTalk Links. That's the OPC UA connector in case you're talking to some third-party Kepware type thing that you're bringing in back through Gateway. And then that's any OPC UA client. Out here somewhere is where you would have your Ignition or whatever it may be that would in turn be using this as an OPC UA server to get the information out. Right, so there's nothing in there Rockwell other than this. And again, the ability for us to talk to our controllers, for us to be able to provide those extended tags, that's the only way you're going to get to those extended tags. Then of course there is the SE local version. It's the same scenario again, except we're running SE down here at this level. And the only reason we'd put Gateway in that mix is if there was data that we wanted to get out to another system outside of Rockwell that we need to use OPC UA, MQTT, or something of that nature. right? We're trying to get data from here, either out to the cloud or to your MES system or something of that kind, right? And we need to use like OPC UA or MQTT. That's what we would do. Everything be loaded on one machine. When we say SE local, that's what we mean. Everything's on that one machine. Now, Links Gateway can be built in a distributed environment, and we can also configure the Links Gateway to where you got redundant link servers, right? And the purpose of redundant link servers, if this one drops off, I still got this one being able to give me data, right? I'm putting FactoryTalk Links Gateway up top, and it's able to determine which one's live and talk to the one that's live. So I got redundancy at this level. I don't have redundancy at this level. So systems that's up here somewhere that's talking through this, there's not redundancy built in here, but there is redundancy, if you will, on the plant floor through our networks and things like that, because you could put this up in the server closet if you wanted to. Again, that's the kind of the infrastructure you're looking at. Multiple data servers. There's a data server. No, there's the gateway, sorry. There's the gateway. There's FactoryTalk Links 1, FactoryTalk Links 2, and here's third-party data servers, and it's all coming back through the FactoryTalk Links Gateway. But that guy right there is talking to both of those at the same time. There is a way to get multiple instances of FactoryTalk Links Gateway. And again, what happens in this scenario, both of these guys are actually talking to both of these servers, right? It's not really redundant, because what's happening is both of them are carrying on the conversation. Whatever you're using on the OPC UA side, as far as OPC client side of this, it would have to be smart enough to know if one of these goes down and switch over to the other one. We don't handle the switching mechanism in here. That's true across the board with any OPC UA vendor that I'm aware of. The switching mechanism is handled by the client, not the server itself. That's true with Kepware and some other vendors that we have, that we deal with. This is just a much bigger application. We're continuing to blow it out. The one that I showed you earlier, it's the exact model of that. We got 2 Links gateways, and then we got multiple data servers, a primary and a secondary. We got a third-party server, and then we've got something, in this case it's SE, but it could be something else, right? It's talking through the gateway, but we're having to make that determination of which gateway's live and which one's not. Data bridge is this component. So remember what I said we could do is, if we had PLCs down here with the data bridge, we could take data that's in this controller. It would end up going back through the gateway, but we could take data from here and get it into this one, and it doesn't have to be a Rockwell controller. So we can share data through that connection of the gateway itself.